Hello and welcome back to Where the Funk is Cole. This week, Cole got to take a look at Istanbul. Cole, can you tell me a little bit about your experiences traveling and going there?
Yeah, I went there with my parents. It was nice seeing them again, since for the first time since I left back in, oh geez, mid-January. But it was very nice. The flight over was not eventful. It was about an hour and a half, give or take, from Athens to Istanbul itself. And from there, we had prearranged transportation, and we took that to our hotel. And from that, we just did a lot of just walking based stuff to the four basic sites that we saw in Istanbul.
Awesome. Well, I guess it is definitely good to see the folks every now and then. So that must have been really
Yes, it
nice.
is.
So, what different locations did you get to take a look at then?
On the first day, i.e., the day we landed, we visited the I think it's Topik Palace. It's the one where the Ottoman Sultans lived. And then later in the evening, we visited the Blue Mosque. And then the following day, we visited the Basilica Cistern and the Hagia Sophia.
Awesome. That sounds like a pretty wide range of different locations you got to visit. Well,
Yes.
tell me about the palace. What was that like? What's the decor or the historical significance of that?
So the Topik Palace was the palace of the Ottoman Sultans for several hundred years, and within it, it is just beautifully decorated. Four large gardens, great views of the Bosphorus Strait itself, and it has a lot of different chambers. The way I would describe it is imagine like you're any sort of royal palace, but give it like Eastern Islamic characteristics. That's the simplest way I can describe it. So you had your simple gardens, and you also had a huge library filled with various, and I'm putting this in quotes because I'm skeptical of the fact that these are the real deal, holy artifacts. And then you also had, of course, because this is the Ottoman Empire, the harem section, along with various other parts of the palace itself.
That sounds like a lot of ground to cover. So, would you
Yes.
say if you had to compare it to something else, like let's say Versailles that we visited before,
Mhm.
how would that stack up compared to those?
I would say, in some respects, it's like comparing apples and oranges because while they both were massive in their own right, they each had their own beautiful characteristics. Because again, these palaces are built from two different cultures, so in some respects it is hard to accurately compare the two. But what I will say about the Topik Palace is that it has a lot of just beautiful decor. The grounds are beautiful, and it has a lot of just nice artifacts that Versailles just did not have, from my understanding.
So it sounds in some ways like it's better preserved, having a lot more of these original artifacts.
Yes.
That's really neat. So tell me about what you got to see that evening.
So after the palace, my parents and I, we went back to the hotel, relaxed for a bit, and then we visited the Blue Mosque, which is a mosque in Istanbul, and we were able to go inside, but we had to work around the five call to prayer times, since it this is Ramadan, so we had to work around that. But luckily, we went into the outer courtyard where the tourists would wait, and we did that during the times when people were inside praying. So we were able to get into the front of the line and be able to go in. And from inside, it was just beautiful. The top of the structure, beautiful mosaics, artwork, all of that. Although I will say that you do have to take your shoes off, which wasn't really a problem. And then if you're a female, you do have to cover up for modesty, so to speak. But the courtyard inside of the mosque, that was also just really beautiful. The architecture, it was just amazing.
Sounds like that must have been really interesting to go take a look inside.
Mhm.
So basically, pretty much because it is actually like a real mosque. It, like you said a minute ago, it pretty much just has like the standard operating procedures, for lack
Basically.
of better terms.
Yeah.
Okay, so does like you were talking about like the ornate design of this mosque? Does that is that
Mhm.
similar? I know it's like of Eastern influence. Is that similar to the palace's architectural style?
Yeah. A lot of them had very similar, including this is also the same with the Hagia Sophia itself. They have a lot of just, I don't know how to describe it, like just beautiful looking tiles, especially on their upper domes. So whereas Christian and then Orthodox Christian cathedrals have like paintings on top, they have a lot of just beautiful tile patterns because that is their way of just making the space so beautiful without having images of like say saints or God or whoever. Because in Islam, it is expressly forbidden from portraying the Prophet Muhammad, God, or any other holy figure.
So I guess that is actually a really creative way to be able to express like the artistic abilities of the people who built this at the time in a really interesting way.
Yes.
I bet that also was pretty complicated in its own right as well.
Yeah. I mean, I will say that the engineering is just amazing building it, but I mean, I think by the time it was built, they had pretty much had the whole idea structure down because a lot of the mosques you can tell follow the same similar pattern with at least four towers on each corner, which clerics or the Islamic equivalent priests would go out and if the mosque is set up this way, they will stand outside on those things and read verses of the Quran, which will call people into prayer. And you can hear those before and after each call to prayer. And in some cases, it's done in a call and response kind of way between two mosques, but sometimes it's just done straight from just one mosque.
That sounds like a pretty important task then.
Yes.
Well, sounds like that was a pretty busy first day over there. So can you tell me a little bit more about what happened on day two of
Yeah.
this
So on the second day, we woke up, we had breakfast at the hotel, and then we went to this place, the Basilica Cistern, which was this underground cistern basically that stored all the water for the Topic Palace. And when you go down there, it's just a lot of columns, but it's just they turned the space that would normally be like a not so beautiful space into something that's just amazing. They had lights that would reflect on the ceilings and on the water on the floor, so that it gave the color change just completely revitalized the space. Some of the columns had ornate designs on them, but only a few because of time. And there were even some art installations inside. So they looked like they were floating on the water. One I remember particularly was a bioluminescent jellyfish.
Whoa, that actually sounds like that would be a really cool place to go. Just look at all of
I know
this. And I guess also with it being like you said, it contained back in the day, it contained water for the palace. That was also pretty important as well.
Yes, although I will say the most interesting fact about it was that I believe this was the Bond film From Russia with Love. There is a scene where James Bond is Sean Connery is going through that on a motorcycle, I believe. Granted, that would not fly today, but what can I say? The '60s.
Well, hey, sometimes it's I would say hindsight is 2020.
Yeah,
Maybe that might not have been the best idea, but I bet it did probably get a pretty cool shot.
it did.
Very
And then
cool.
yeah, and then after that we visited the Hagia Sophia. We were spent most of the time on the upper level. We for some reason we couldn't find our way down to the main lower level, but we were able just to see everything from above, which was really cool. And some highlights there was you have this interesting fusion between Islamic art because it was used as a mosque for several hundred years, along with remaining Christian mosaics. So you have like Islamic art in one area, and then another wall you could just see a old Byzantine mosaic of Jesus. And another thing that was interesting was on the upper level along one of the balcony ways that allows you to look down onto the main floor. There is Norse carvings on that, and the story goes is that I can't remember. This is when this guy was a part of the Varangian Guard, which was basically the personal guard to the Byzantine emperors or some tourist, but he carved his name into the side or like on top of this railing, so you can see this like Norse name and like inscription in this place that also has a lot of Islamic and Christian influences.
That's really fascinating. It's a really interesting to see, Norse, Christian, and Islamic kind of cultures in one
Yes.
location. That and it's really fascinating because you would not expect like a Norse etching to be somewhere like this.
No, and honestly, I had no idea it was there until a friend of mine who I just chance met up with for lunch one day here in Athens told me about it, and I was like, okay. And then went there and I saw the name carved in. It's covered up by like basically plexiglass now for obvious reasons, but it just blows my mind that like here's this guy's name who visited this place that was yeah over 1,000 years ago.
That really is interesting to think about how long ago some of these like historical figures would have actually been there. But it's also very interesting to see like even with like more recent history, you know sometimes things might not be as far away as like they actually feel like. But it's very interesting to see like with this location how much that's changed over 1,000 years. Who came in first? Who constructed this? Was it the Christians or
Yes,
the Muslims?
originally was a Orthodox Christian basilica for a couple hundred years, and then when the Byzantines fell in 1453 to the Ottomans, it was converted into a mosque, and it stayed that way for several hundred years until after the fall of the Ottoman Empire in 1920. I think either in 1920 or a couple years after, it was converted into a museum until I think recently in the past decade. I don't know if this went through or not. I don't think so because it is still referred to as museum, but I think there was talk in the Turkish parliament of reconverting it back into a part-time mosque. I can't confirm if that went through or not, but I heard that was on the cards for a while.
Very interesting. Yeah, I would be interested to see like how often that happens for places that I guess you could say have been like decommissioned or
Yeah.
turned into a museum or anything like that. That's interesting. I will be. I think it would be very fascinating to see if that actually does go through. If it has not already been at least approved. So that's really interesting. Okay. So what else did you do that second day?
So on top of that, we did go to the Grand Bazaar, which is the largest indoor market in the world. And I personally didn't get anything, but my mom, we went to three different shops, and my mom got herself like a tiny little bowl and like a piece of fabric. But like I'll be honest, I was expecting it to be a lot more crowded than it was when we went. But it was still crowded, but not too crowded, and I think that's because we did go later in the day, around 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, when a lot of the people probably came earlier, I think. But, I mean, it was definitely an experience to be sure, and, that was the only other major thing we did, and aside from, seeing this, column outside the Blue Mosque in this park, there is, this column that has this late Roman, I think early Byzantine base, but on top is this Egyptian obelisk. And the story behind that is when I think Constantine the Great made Constantinople the new capital of Rome. He imported a lot of stuff from across the empire. So you have this obelisk Roman hybrid. You also have the remains of this tripod from Delphi itself. So you have this a lot of these artifacts are still standing in some form of preservation. So that was the other cool thing that we did see.
Wow. No, I mean that's really interesting to see. An Egyptian
Yeah.
obelisk, pretty interesting to see somewhere like that too. Okay, so I was thinking about it. You talked about that bazaar a minute ago,
Hmm.
and could you tell me like what wares did you see a lot of these vendors selling? What was probably like not just for like tourists, but what was
Hmm.
the most common things that you saw for sale there?
The most common things I did see were either fabrics, like gold, jewelry, and that pottery. Those are the big three things I did see. I do know that there are shops that have other things besides that, but I did not really see any myself.
So it sounds like a lot of like handmade goods. Goods are
Yes.
really integral part of that. Very
Yes. Although
nice.
there was also a other section that specializes in spices and teas, but we didn't go to that.
Oh, you didn't get any tea this time? Oh man, that would have been. I bet that probably would have been really good actually.
Yeah, we actually blanking on the name of the tea. I'm forgetting it, but we had this really good tea at the hotel. It was a blend of I think ginger and something else, but it was really good.
That sounds good. Anything with ginger is usually pretty solid.
Yes.
Well, that sounds like you had a really good visit over to Istanbul recently. So,
Yes,
what
I
was
did.
probably your biggest takeaway from this whole trip?
I would say that like it was so nice to see this city that is thousands of years old and was literally the heart of two empires and a major trade hub. So it was really nice to see that. And another thing was is that I was able to figure out that yeah, with the taxis over there, you just need to do your research as far as like what to expect something should cost ahead of time, so that way you're prepared to do that. And the reason I say that is sometimes the taxis will try to rip you off if you don't know what you're doing.
Oh,
I took the chance to from the hotel to the airport because I was leaving a day earlier than my parents, but we were able to figure out the price that it would generally cost to go from our hotel to the airport, and I had a little bit extra on me just in case, but I just didn't tell the guy how much I had extra, which wasn't that much. So that way, if even he did try to pull that off, which he didn't, luckily, I could just be like, all right, I only have 300 more Lyra. Take it or leave it.
yeah, I guess that is actually with transportation in any foreign city, probably literally anywhere. It is a very good idea to do your
Yeah.
research for something like that ahead of time. So, well, it's good that you did not get ripped off at all, and they didn't try
Yeah.
to scam you money though.
Yeah. I'm glad on that. That didn't happen to me either.
That's really good. Okay, yeah, that's a very good travel tip to do some research.
Hmm. Yes.
Well, cool. It sounds like it's been a really good week recently with all the travels you've done, and it seems like things have been going well over at college for regular classes as
Yes.
well, right?
Yes, it has. We just finished up midterms the 2 weeks prior, so it was nice to be able to go on this trip without much real care, so to speak. Although now it's second half of the semester, And this is when it's really going to heat up, as you know, from time at Furman. Second half of the
Oh
semester is
yes,
always the more intense one.
it gets really hard at the end. I totally get you on that. Well, we're just going to have to get through it, and
Yes, we will.
finish well. All right, Cole. Well, thank you for tuning in with us again today. I had a great time talking as usual and learning a little bit more about some of your adventures.
I did as well, Colby.
All right. Well, we'll have to speak with you next week and see what you get to do next time.
Yes. All right. Stay tuned until next episode.
Thanks for tuning in.